Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Ryan Pronzinski of Christ Lutheran Church in Michigan Center, Michigan, and this is my Chair Chat Daily Devotion for Friday, September 25th, 2020. Peace be with you. These video devotions are intended to help you engage your life of faith during this time of pandemic, and so with engagement in mind, I encourage you to leave constructive comments, questions, or prayer requests in the comments section below, and I promise that I will get to these in the following videos. I also encourage you to engage in this digital space with one another, or just in general with people around you, or via phone call or something, because when we engage, we learn more, we remember more, and we learn and engage best. And faith is not an individualistic practice, it's a communal one, so find ways to engage with others. The readings that get put forth in each of these videos comes from what's called the Daily Revised Common Lectionary. It is a church calendar reading schedule, and it can be found online. The readings for today, which are in the description below, are as follows. We have Psalm 25, verses 1 through 9, which I will not be reading today, but for details, see yesterday's video from September 24th. Today we also have Ezekiel chapter 18, verses 5 through 18, as well as Acts chapter 13, verses 32 through 41. Now, before I get to the readings themselves, as always, I'd like to invite anybody out there watching these videos to come and join us at Christ Lutheran Church for the live streaming of our online worship service with our Facebook live stream. You can come and participate and worship with us through Facebook Live by looking in the description below, copying and pasting the link into your web browser, and that'll bring you to all of our Facebook Live videos. We live stream our Sunday morning service at 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can leave comments in the comments section where my helpers will, if you got prayer requests, we'll put them in the prayers for the people for the day, and we'll pray for you, or really anything else you think you might need. Come and join us that way. Excuse me. My nose just got a little tingly. It's this fall weather. It starts messing with the sinuses. Let's see. Oh, yes, and then this Sunday, we will be having outdoor worship again. So if you live in the Jackson, Michigan Center area, and you would like to come and join us in person, whether from your car or a lawn chair spread out in the parking lot, please feel free to do so. All that being said, we move on to our first reading, which comes from Ezekiel chapter 18, verses 5 through 18, and reads as follows. If a man is righteous and does what is lawful and right, if he does not eat upon the mountains or lift up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, does not defile his neighbor's wife or approach a woman during her menstrual period, does not oppress anyone, but restores the debtor his pledge, commits no robbery, gives his bread to the hungry, and covers the naked with a garment, does not take advance or accrued interest, withholds his hand from iniquity, executes true justice between contending parties, follows my statutes, and is careful to observe my ordinances, acting faithfully, such a one is righteous. He shall surely live, says the Lord God. If he has a son who is violent, a shedder of blood, who does any of these things, though his father does none of them, who eats upon the mountains, defiles his neighbor's wife, oppresses the poor and needy, commits robbery, does not restore the pledge, lifts up his eyes to idols, commits abomination, takes advance or accrued interest, shall he then live? He shall not. He has done all these abominable things, he shall surely die. His blood shall be upon himself. But if this man has a son who sees all the sins that his father has done, considers and does not do likewise, who does not eat upon the mountains or lift up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, does not defile his neighbor's wife, does not wrong anyone, exacts no pledge, commits no robbery, but gives his bread to the hungry, and covers the naked with a garment, withholds his hand from iniquity, takes no advance or accrued interest, observes my ordinances, and follows my statutes, he shall not die for his father's iniquity. he shall surely live. And his father, because he practiced extortion, robbed his brother, and did what is not good among his people, he dies for his iniquity. Here ends the reading. So I don't have this in my notes, but I just want to put it here in this video because reading through this the second time, I'm still really amazed at the importance for God and God's people to, if you loan someone money, to not accrue interest. I mean, in our capitalist society, everything runs on interest rates. And I just wonder what it looks like to live in a society where, especially I had a lot of student debt and student loans. It's like, what does it look like to live in a society where people can get the money they need and not get crushed by debt? There's lots of people doing that. And so my mind just goes there. And so I would have you ponder and pray on that as well. And figure out what it looks like to advocate for people that are being crushed by debt, whether it's student loans or short-term loans, short-term lending companies, which are terrible, credit cards, things like that are being crushed by debt, and what it looks like to have a more just and equitable society as it concerns being able to get the money you need, and still pay it back, and not be crushed by debt. But getting back to my notes themselves, I hear in these words from Ezekiel, right, about a father being faithful and just, but a son sinning, a son being faithful and just, but a father sinning, right? That with all this being said, we can't blame other people for the mistakes we make. And life is more complicated than that, right? It's more complicated than just individual actions. It's not like we're all just a bunch of individuals and like the only thing that matters is like what we do or don't do, and it only affects ourselves. Life is not that simple. The decisions that we do make each day do in fact have effects on others, right? When we choose to feed the hungry or not, we have an impact on that hungry person, right? When we choose to loan money without interest or not, we have an impact on the borrower, right? You can be crushed by debt or just still owe money, right? People's principles keep growing when they defer payments or they can't make payments, right? And so their debt gets even larger because of interest versus, the debt staying the same and then each time it's paid anyway. It has an impact on the other person. When we choose to support a marriage or not, because adultery isn't just about cheating on people, but when we choose to support a marriage or not, we have an impact on that marriage, right? Our actions affect more than ourselves. But at the end of the day, even though other people's actions affect what kind of actions we can take, we are responsible for the ones we can take. And what I mean by what other people's actions do affect the kinds of actions we can take, right, is this. So, like, let's say student loan. I'll just keep it focused on myself. If I hadn't paid mine off, which I did, but I still had a bunch, and I have lots of friends that do, and you're just being crushed by it because your student loan debt is the same as a mortgage payment or even higher. If the people of this country wanted to, they could elect people who would create policy that would forgive student loan debt, or at least, over time, forgive it, right? And then that would allow people like myself and my age and a little bit younger than me, instead of paying a mortgage payment or more on student loans, we could actually buy a home, right? And so what other people decide to do with their vote and who they elect and the actions they take, right, and how they fund the state and federal government, and what we value as a society, that affects the kinds of actions that people like myself can take. Do we take out tens of thousands of dollars of student loans because we know that if we get a degree we're likely to have better outcomes, even though we're going to be under crippling debt, right? It affects those kinds of actions we take. But at the end of the day, I choose what actions I take. I'm still responsible for them. And so, harmful, selfish actions that go against God and God's mercy kill, right? That's what's being said in this reading today. However, loving, gracious, merciful actions that trust God and support God's will bring life. And it's not always easy to make the faithful, helpful, loving decisions. But when we don't, everyone hurts in the long run. And this is true even with my example. If we keep making education harder and harder and harder to attain, our people that need to take over the jobs and innovate and do things with time, if we don't invest in education, our country's going to hurt in the long run. Yeah, people might need to pay some more taxes to make, education more affordable and more accessible and more equitable for younger people. But that's what we do to benefit our whole society. Because the reality is, if you're wanting to live on Social Security and things like that, you need the younger taxpayers to have good jobs paying taxes to cover your Medicare and your Social Security, right? So, we're all in this together. Anyway, so, this reading is far more complicated than it seems at first blush. It does talk about how, we're going to be either uplifted by God for our actions that we take on our own, or there'll be dire consequences against ourselves. Like someone else's bad actions, they're not going to, cause God to be mad at me. God's going to be mad at that person. But our actions do affect one another. Otherwise, God wouldn't say, feed the hungry and clothe the naked, right? God doesn't say to the hungry person or the naked person, go find food yourself, or find clothes yourself. He says to the people around him, you have enough clothing and food to feed them. Feed this person, they're hurting. And then help make it so that they don't need to go hungry or be naked again, right? So when we don't live in this compassionate, merciful, gracious way, we all hurt in the long run, right? Said in the positive, when we all seek to trust and live lovingly, graciously, and mercifully, all people benefit. All people benefit. So I guess I'll end this section by asking this. In what areas of your life do you struggle to be merciful? Or to give the benefit of the doubt, if you will, or to treat someone in the best possible light with grace and mercy? Where do you struggle to be generous with your time, your gifts, with yourself, where you can benefit others? We all do this. Yeah. So think about these things. I'm not calling y'all a bunch of bad people. I'm just saying, we have our gifts, and we have our moments where we often want to be pretty self-contained with them and not be as merciful or as gracious as we could be. Not necessarily should be, but could be. And so where are those areas? And where might God be calling you to be a little bit more gracious or merciful today, so that all people, including yourself, can benefit? Because that person that you show grace to, that you show mercy to, might be the person that ends up showing grace and mercy to you when you need it. That's what community looks like. We take care of each other. All right, on to Acts chapter 13, verses 32 through 41. And we bring you the good news that what God promised to our ancestors, he has fulfilled for us, their children, by raising Jesus. Oh, the resurrection. As also it is written in the second psalm, you are my son, today I have begotten you. As to his raising him from the dead, no more to return to corruption, he has spoken in this way. I will give you the holy promises made to David. Therefore he has also said in another psalm, you will not let your Holy One experience corruption. For David, after he had served the purpose of God in his own generation, died, was laid beside his ancestors, and experienced corruption. But he whom God raised up experienced no corruption. Let it be known to you, therefore, my brothers, that through this man Jesus, forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. By this Jesus, Everyone who believes is set free from all those sins from which you could not be freed by the law of Moses. Beware, therefore, that what the prophets said does not happen to you. Look, you scoffers, for in your days I am doing a work that you will never believe, even if someone tells you. Here ends the reading. So I'm glad we get to end with this reading, because the last reading in Ezekiel was all law. There was no gospel there. I mean, it speaks a truth to how God would have us live and the consequences of if we live that way or not. We do have responsibility. But the reality is none of us is ever going to live perfectly according to God's law, according to the law of Moses, as the reading says today. We're never going to say all the right things at the right times in the right places. We're never going to share our gifts, our time, our gifts, and our money perfectly throughout our lives. We're never going to advocate for justice and support families around us perfectly all the time. Said plainly, there are going to be days when we live selfishly, choose ourselves over everyone else, and sin. And as Ezekiel said, the consequences of this sin is death or corruption. And it's put, as it's put in the reading today. Sin leads to death and the corruption of our body. I feel like that's true not just in the being laid to rest in the ground and body decaying corrupt, but communities become corrupt and die and decay when it becomes so focused on being individualistic and selfish. And so, that's a warning. But the grace is this. We are reminded that in Jesus, as we trust in Jesus, our sins are forgiven. And we will not be left in this corruption and death. Right? We too will be raised. As he was raised, we shall be raised also, right? And so we are free from the fear of never being good enough, because that can become a trap too. You're constantly trying to do good things, improve yourself, and then even in that, you're not necessarily even concerned with the good that you're doing, just that you're doing some sort of good so that you don't be seen as sinful and corrupt. You live out of a place of fear. No, we are forgiven, and so we are free from that. We are free from this fear of never being good enough, free from the fear of death that we know we cannot escape no matter how much good we do. And so then what that means is we are free to repent. That is, when we recognize our selfishness and our sin, we turn around and we say, Jesus, I am sorry, forgive me, help me to live better today. Right? As Lutherans, we talk about a daily dying and rising. We say, all right, yesterday is buried. Jesus is forgiving it, has forgiven it, right? How do I do better today? That's the freedom we have. We're not trying to look back to yesterday and go, well, how do I make up for it now? It's like, okay, that day is over. How would God have me live today? Right? How do I learn from the past? Not necessarily make up for it, but learn from the past and live as God would have me live today because I am forgiven, right? And so we are free to keep loving imperfectly, and we are free to trust that God in Jesus has our back even as we mess up, right? So God bless you in figuring out how to be more gracious and merciful today, because God's got your back even if you mess it up. And God give you peace in knowing that even as you live this way imperfectly, and you will, God will not leave you in sin and corruption as you trust, as you place your faith in Jesus. With that, I say to you again, peace be with you, and I will talk to you tomorrow.